Global alarm spreads as RKV threat looms. By Global News Network, October 12, 2117. The news of relativistic kill vehicles, RKVs, hurtling towards Earth has sparked a worldwide rush for preparations. Initially met with skepticism, governments across the globe are now urgently mobilizing resources to confront the imminent threat of doomsday missiles. The realization that Earth, and potentially the entire galaxy, faces peril has injected unparalleled urgency into the global response. Despite the vast distance and time before any potential impact, apprehension is palpable. While there is no widespread panic, there is a resounding call for swift action. Memories of past crises, such as the catastrophic events of half a century ago, loom large in the public consciousness. The costly lessons of delay are seared into collective memory, fueling demands for decisive measures from governmental authorities. William Thornton sat in his office, his eyes fixed on the glowing holographic display embedded in his desk. The article from Global News Network detailed the escalating global response to the RKV threat, emphasizing the urgency and public demand for action. As he read, a mix of frustration and determination coursed through him. "Betrayed," muttered the Secretary of Defense under his breath. His plan to control the narrative had unraveled, threatening not only his political ambitions but also his carefully cultivated alliances with powerful corporate interests. With brisk steps, he marched towards the conference room where crucial decisions awaited and where he would confront those who had betrayed him. The echo of his thoughts lingered, plans disrupted, alliances strained. As he approached the war room, he steeled himself. "Never again," he told himself. "Our government should never dictate what individuals must do in the face of a crisis. We must not lose ourselves, no matter the cost. If I can't find allies in the upcoming meeting, I will find them somewhere else." The atmosphere in the war room was electric, a mix of tension and determination palpable in the air. The harsh overhead lights cast stark shadows on the faces of the gathered scientists, engineers, military leaders, and representatives from major corporations, including Syntech. The room was filled with the faint scent of sweat and stale coffee, evidence of the long hours already spent in preparation and organization of this event. Susan was standing at the front, a holographic display behind her showing the trajectories of the RKVs. "We need ideas. Any ideas? No matter how outlandish they may seem. We aim to stop or divert the RKVs before they reach us." Dr. Marcus Hill couldn't resist a smirk. "Finally, my time to shine," he muttered under his breath. He carefully twisted his curled mustache in an almost arrogant gesture. His mouth, however, betrayed the gesture with a charming smile. The Secretary of Defense, William Thornton, still infuriated by the news getting out, leaned in. "Let's keep this focused. We have no time to waste. The public demands answers." William paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "We need to have the public opinion behind us." Susan sat down and gestured to the assembling, motioning them to begin. Dr. Aisha Ramirez started. "What about gravitational manipulation? We could use redirected asteroids to create a gravitational pull strong enough to alter the RKV's trajectories. They only need a tiny nudge to miss us, and at that speed, altering their course would be difficult. Some quick calculations showed that gravity manipulation, the method that saved Earth almost a decade ago from a large meteor impact, would have to start light years away. If only we had the AI online, this would be so much easier," muttered Aisha. Susan glanced at Raj with a furrowed brow. "Raj, have we received any updates on the AI system?" Raj sighed, his expression grim. "No, Susan. Still offline. Ever since they redirected power to that prepper compound." Susan's frustration flared. "Unbelievable. They cut off critical support right when we need it most." Raj nodded in agreement. "I know. It's a setback, but we'll manage." Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of Claudia Marquez, CEO of Syntech, who had been silently observing the discussion. She approached Susan with a determined expression. "Susan, Raj," Claudia began, her voice carrying a sense of urgency. "I've been briefed on the situation with the AI. Syntech has some innovative solutions that could potentially replace its functionalities. Susan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Go on. Claudia nodded, her gaze unwavering. We've been working on AI-assisted systems for our space projects. With some adjustments, we could deploy a temporary solution that might alleviate some of your current challenges. Raj looked skeptical. How quickly can you get these systems operational? Claudia's lips formed a tight line. We'll prioritize it. We understand the gravity of the situation. Susan exchanged a glance with Raj, weighing their options. All right, Claudia. Let's see what Syntech can do. Let us continue with considering what options we have to stop the missiles. Dr. Marcus Hill, ever the contrarian, suggested, what if we try sending nuclear missiles from Earth? With the right timing, we could potentially intercept the RKVs. Susan raised an eyebrow. Given the speed of the RKVs, there might not be enough time for the nukes to react to their target after detection. Plus, the energy requirements would be astronomical. And we'd need an entire arsenal to even make a dent. It's not a viable option, Raj added. Dr. Emily Chun proposed, what about deploying a massive fleet of drones to create a barrier in space? They could use synchronized detonation to create a shockwave. Susan shook her head. The coordination required would be immense, and at relativistic speeds, the shockwave might not even slow them down. We need something more direct and impactful. Dr. Marcus Hill leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting with a mixture of excitement and mischief. If the original message has to be taken seriously, he began, his voice tinged with a hint of theatricality. They were going after the planets. Perhaps, just maybe, everyone could live in space. A ripple of amused skepticism spread through the room, followed by a few stifled chuckles. Dr. Hill was used to these reactions. His unconventional ideas often straddled the line between genius and madness. Susan raised an eyebrow, a wry smile playing on her lips. Marcus, you never fail to surprise us. That will not work, said Raj, shaking his head. While space technology has improved in the last few decades, we are still far from being able to create self-sustaining stations. Hell, even the South Pole base is not self-reliant on food, despite the availability of air and many efforts. Dr. Hill's expression turned more serious. I know it's not practical now, but think about the implications. If Mars, Venus, or even Mercury were targeted and destroyed, the debris would pose a significant threat to Earth. We need to consider defending not just our planet, but our entire solar system. The room fell silent as the gravity of his statement sank in. Susan, now more contemplative, turned to the holographic display showing the trajectories. Marcus has a point, she said slowly. The destruction of other planets could create a debris field that would be catastrophic for Earth. We need a comprehensive defense strategy that considers all potential threats. Dr. Emily Chen nodded in agreement. We should include early detection and interception measures for any debris created by potential impacts on other planets. She then continued, while wiping the sweat off her brow, to bring up a different angle. Whatever the solution, we need substantial space infrastructure to intercept and deflect the missiles. This will require an unprecedented mobilization of resources. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka added, yeah, we're talking about building massive space stations equipped with powerful lasers or kinetic impactors arranged for interception. That takes decades at best, and we need to start now. As the brainstorming continued, the challenges became increasingly clear. Building a substantial space infrastructure was the most viable path, but it was fraught with logistical and financial hurdles. Susan turned to the Syntech representatives. Your company has the resources and technology to make this happen. What do you propose? The Syntech CEO, Claudia Marquez, stood up. The soft hum of the air conditioning kicked in as both outside and inside the temperature started to rise. She spoke with conviction. Syntech is ready to commit its full resources to this endeavor. We see this not just as a challenge, but as an opportunity. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. We're prepared to lead the construction of the necessary infrastructure. We suggest a multi-phase approach. The Secretary of Defense, William Thornton, interjected. Can you be more specific? We need details, Claudia. Claudia nodded, unperturbed. Of course. The first step is to October 13th, 2117. The quiet room wrapped around Susan, with only the distant hum of a fan breaking the silence. The events of the day weighed heavily on her mind, making it hard to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and she fell into a restless sleep. Susan woke from the buzzer of the alarm. Annoyed and still tired, she slammed the alarm clock to snooze a bit longer. As she turned onto her other side, she remembered all the things she had to take care of. Sighing, she stood up and watched a bird picking between the plants. She smiled and thought, "The early bird catches the worm." The research facility buzzed with focused activity. Desks that were empty the previous night were now occupied by scientists and engineers deeply engrossed in their tasks. The air hummed with the sound of keyboards clicking, quiet discussions, and the occasional beep of equipment. Dr. Aisha Ramirez and Dr. Emily Chan navigated through the organized chaos, exchanging nods and brief words with their colleagues as they made their way to their designated area. Amidst the controlled frenzy, Emily leaned towards Aisha, her expression thoughtful. "You know," Emily began, her voice barely audible above the background noise, "I heard something interesting about Dr. Marcus Hill." Aisha turned to her with interest, adjusting her glasses. "Oh? What about him?" Emily glanced around the bustling room before continuing. "Apparently, he once came very close to winning a Nobel Prize for discovering life on an exoplanet." Aisha raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Really? I didn't know that. What happened?" Emily nodded, recalling the details she had heard. "Well, just before the award ceremony, he debunked his own findings. Turned out there was a flaw in the data analysis. It was quite a setback for him." Aisha frowned thoughtfully, considering the implications. "That must have been a tough decision." "Yeah," Emily agreed. "But it speaks volumes about his commitment to scientific integrity and his willingness to admit when something isn't right." As they reached their desks, Aisha couldn't help but glance across the room at Dr. Hill, who was engaged in an animated discussion with a group of scientists near the window. His gestures were lively, his mustache twitching as he emphasized a point, seemingly unfazed by the urgency of their current predicament. Their conversation was momentarily interrupted by the arrival of a senior researcher with updates on their latest simulations. As they delved back into their work, Aisha kept Dr. Hill's backstory in mind, recognizing that his unconventional thinking and readiness to challenge conventional wisdom might prove invaluable as they brainstormed solutions to the RKV crisis. Susan, struck by a critical thought from the previous day's discussions, walked purposefully to a whiteboard, grabbed a marker, and wrote "Defend the entire solar system" in bold letters. She underlined the phrase twice, the marker squeaking with emphasis. The room grew tense as eyes followed the movement of her hand. "Shit, she's right," Emily said softly. In the silence, everyone turned to her, causing her to blush a furious red. "Sorry," she muttered. Meanwhile, Raj approached Susan, his expression thoughtful. "Do you remember the rumors about Synteca's experiments? The ones that were supposedly too dangerous?" Susan frowned. "Yeah, I do. Why?" Raj looked thoughtful. "What if those experiments weren't just rumors? What if they were preparing for something like this all along?" Susan's eyes widened. "You think they knew about the RKVs?" Raj shook his head. "Not exactly, but they might have been preparing for a different kind of existential threat. It's worth looking into." Susan nodded. "Agreed. But for now, let's focus on the task at hand." As they continued their work, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The survival of humanity depended on their success, and the clock was ticking. Susan looked at Raj, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "You know, I never thought I'd see the day when a corporation would switch sides so dramatically." Raj chuckled. "Come on, we are going to provide them with decades of work. They had no choice." Susan smiled back and then turned her gaze to the tablet she was holding. The enormity of the threat, the pressure from the public, and the ongoing schemes of different stakeholders weighed heavy on her shoulders. Susan sat at her desk, typing furiously at her tablet. She paused, taking a deep breath before opening a secure communication channel. She needed to contact Dr. Dmitry Ivanov, her colleague in Russia, who was overseeing the large 100-meter telescope built in a crater on the dark side of the moon. The telescope would be crucial for refining the arrival time of the RKVs. The screen flickered, and Dr. Ivanov's face appeared, his expression one of mild curiosity. "Dmitry, it's Susan. I hope I'm not interrupting." Dr. Ivanov smiled warmly. "Not at all, Susan. What can I do for you? We need access to the lunar telescope. It's critical for our current project." Dr. Ivanov's eyebrows rose. "The RKVs, correct? I've heard the news. Terrifying prospect." "Exactly," Susan said. "We need to refine the arrival time and study their effects." Dr. Ivanov nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds feasible. We can arrange access. I'll coordinate with my team to prioritize your observations." "Thank you, Dmitry. This means a lot," Susan replied, relief evident in her voice. Her thoughts briefly drifted to Patrick. She remembered his words about pushing boundaries and the responsibility that came with it. The memory fueled her determination. "Have you considered looking at the recipient of the message as well? Understanding their origins and intentions could be crucial." Dr. Ivanov suggested, bringing Susan back to the present. Susan's relief was immediately shattered. "Of course, we need to do that. I am a bit overwhelmed by all of this. Thank you for bringing this up. Anything to help, Susan. Let's stay in touch and share our findings. We need all the data we can get." "Agreed. I'll send over the details. Thanks again, Dmitry." The call ended, and Susan leaned back in her chair, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. They now had a powerful tool at their disposal, bringing them one step closer to understanding the RKVs and preparing for their arrival. In the dimly lit corridors of power, Secretary William Thornton paced his office, his mind racing with schemes to regain control amidst the RKV crisis. From his window, he observed the solemn procession of people below, candles flickering in the twilight. The sight sparked a devilish smile as he contemplated the public sentiment. "The public wants a spiritual approach?" William muttered to himself, his tone laced with irony. "That's something I can work with." He turned away from the window, his gaze hardening with determination. With a flick of his wrist, he activated a secure communication channel, connecting him to his network of influential allies and backers. "I need a plan," he stated firmly, his voice low but commanding. "We'll leverage this divine challenge narrative to redirect resources and sway public opinion." His advisors nodded in silent agreement, keenly aware of the power plays unfolding. They knew William's connections ran deep, his influence pervasive in both political and corporate circles. As William surveyed the room, a calculated resolve settled over him. The march outside was not just a symbolic display. It was an opportunity, a means to exploit public fear and uncertainty to his advantage. William murmured, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "They won't see it coming." During a lull in their hectic schedule, Susan and Raj took a moment to glance out the window of their research facility. They were met with a surprising sight. A crowd of people holding candles and singing, marching down the street below. It brought Raj back to the days of the crisis, when similar marches were held in memory of those lost. His thoughts involuntarily turned to his younger brother, who had starved during those dark times. The memory of his brother's suffering fueled Raj's determination to contribute to a better future for humanity. He firmly believed that expanding into space was essential to alleviate the burden on Earth and prevent such tragedies from recurring. But this march, in response to the RKV threat, stirred a different emotion within him, anger. No one had died yet, and if Raj had his way, no one ever would do to the RKVs. "This," Raj muttered under his breath, "this shouldn't have to happen again. Not like before." Susan, sensing his distress, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "It's a reminder of why we're here, Raj. We have to make sure this time we're ready. No more tragedies." Raj nodded, his gaze still fixed on the solemn procession outside. "You're right, Susan. We can't afford to fail." As they turned back to their work, the resolve in their hearts burned brighter. The march served as a reminder of the urgency of their mission, to protect humanity from a threat that,